so let's continue. Suppose there's a recession. Okay. Now, of course, in any recession, any government try to increase the output, try to boost the output. So we start from point A, okay, and suppose there is a demand from abroad. So suppose our export increase, okay. So if the export increase, let's remember the export is the distance between ZZ and ZZ prime. Go back to the earlier chart about export and import. So export is always, the distance is the same always, because export is not a function of y, okay, and that's why the distance is always the same. So suppose there's an increase of demand from abroad, so our export increase, that means ZC goes up to ZC prime. So what happens if ZC goes up to ZC prime? Well, point A shift to point this, right? Okay, so our output now increase from Y all the way here. Okay, that is the case if there is just increase foreign demand. Okay. Now, however, remember, in order to produce export, sometimes we also have to import, because you cannot export if you don't produce. In order to produce, you have to import too. Now, in this chart, I intentionally did not show the import, but the point here you can see in the trade balance here. So see what happened when you move from Y to Y prime, for example, from A to A prime. The trade deficit is already increasing here. So you start from no deficit here. No deficit means balance. But now you have increase of surplus now. Why? Because you increase your export. Let me repeat. You start from the equilibrium here, Y. And you are equilibrium in your trade balance. No deficit, no surplus. But then suppose there's increased demand for export. So that means ZC shift up here. Output increase. And because at this stage we are assuming there's no import, if export increase, then your trade balance becomes surplus. Here, okay. So what you have, assuming there's no increase in import, then what you have is that if there is foreign demand, output increase, trade is in surplus. Wonderful, right? And that's why every country, including Indonesia, expect that foreign countries will demand our product. Okay? So, but that is only one side of the story. What about the other side? Well, suppose the other side is something to do with another concept in macro which is very important, and today I will start to introduce, and that is the concept of exchange rate. In Bahasa it's called kurs, like rupiah per US dollar and so on. So that's the kurs here. Now, we all know, and I assume you also know, if our exchange rate depreciate, jadi rupiah melemah, okay? So suppose exchange rate depreciate, that will boost our export. Why? Because the price of our export will go down. And vice versa, what happened with import? If we depreciate our currency, the price of our import will go up. And as a result, we reduce the import. And that's why if you have trade deficit, then you tend to depreciate the currency. Because the whole idea is that you want to make your export price lower so that everybody wants to buy your product. On the other hand, you want to make the price of import higher so that you reduce your import. Okay. Now, that is a nice story. That's a textbook story. Now, let's see what happened in the real world. Well, let's see. Suppose you depreciate the currency. Let's say rupiah depreciate from, I don't know today. Let's say today is 13,500. And let's say we try to make it to 17,000. Now, again, from our explanation earlier, that is good for export, right? And it's bad for import. Well, if export increase, import decline, then our trade deficit will become surplus. Or if it is not surplus, at least the deficit will narrow down, right? But that is textbook. And here is the reality. If you depreciate the currency, yes, your price of export goes down. Yes, the price of import goes up. But the volume of import continues to go up. That is what is missing from the previous story. Remember previous story when I said there is an increase in the foreign demand. It's wonderful because your output increase and your trade is in surplus, right? But that is only one side of the story. The other side is if your currency depreciates, what happens is that price of export goes down, price of import goes up, which is good on textbook because if price of import goes up, you reduce the import. Vice versa, if the price of your export prices goes down, that means you increase the price, the export, right? But in real world, even if the price of import goes up, we cannot reduce the volume of the import. You see that? Remember my story earlier, because Indonesia are so dependent on import. Even if the price of imported goods increase, theoretically a price increase, demand will reduce, right? But in reality, no, we cannot. And this is the concept of elasticity of substitution that I said earlier. And that is the reasons why when you depreciate the currency, you may suffer from worsening trade deficit. So pay attention on this, because in the exam we may ask you, most people who do not really understand about the detailed macroeconomics will always jump to the conclusion, oh, let's make rupiah weaken so that our export will increase, our trade balance will be improving. No, that's not always the case, because we are dependent so much on import. So imagine if the price of import goes up, but the volume maintains the same, then basically the value of the import will go up, and that will worsen the trade deficit. And that is this chart. Okay? So you see, if there is a depreciation here, you would expect that you go up there, because this is zero, right? So suppose your deficit in point A, and you expect if you depreciate the currency, you will reduce the deficit, but it turns out you widen the deficit. Now, ideally, over time, that's why this is time, right? Over time, you will start producing your own intermediate goods. So you can reduce the volume of import. And assuming you are successful in doing that, then your deficit will gradually disappear. Okay? But again, this is textbook, because I don't know how many years Indonesia has already independent. So many years, but we are still import dependent. So this is only textbook story here. Okay? But in reality, this is always the case. Whenever we want to increase our production, we always increase our import. Okay? So that's the story. Now, since we are already introducing the concept of exchange rate, and by now I hope you know the importance of the exchange rate, because it deals directly with the export and import. Okay? Then maybe we need to understand also the difference between nominal exchange rate and the real exchange rate. Okay. Essentially, the nominal exchange rate and the real exchange rate is distinguished only by the price. So if we are talking about the change, not the level, but the change in the nominal exchange rate vis-a-vis the change in the real exchange rate, then essentially we are talking about the difference is the change in the price. So what is the change in the price? It's inflation. So that's why the change in the nominal exchange rate plus the change in the inflation, that is equals to the change in the real exchange rate. So that is this equation. So this, on the left hand side, is the change of the real exchange rate. Here is the change in the nominal exchange rate. And here is the change in the inflation. It's the change in the price, sorry. Okay? So if you refer to this curve, by the way, this curve is also known as J curve, I guess because the shape looks like letter J, okay? So essentially, the story, let me repeat, if your currency depreciates, at the beginning, you worsen the trade deficit. And only over time, assuming you are able to produce yourself the intermediate, only over time you can reduce the trade deficit, right? So, that's why there is a condition in which if you depreciate the currency, you improve the trade balance. In this chart, there is no case here because in this chart, the improvement of trade balance is from B to this point, but still below zero, right? That means you still have deficit, but at least you narrow down the deficit. So there is a condition which says that if you depreciate your currency and then you improve your trade deficit, that condition is called Marshall-Lerner condition. So this is the Marshall-Lerner condition. So essentially, what it says is that if there is a currency depreciation, if you meet the Marshall-Lerner condition, then your trade balance will improve. Okay?